Okay, so we're live now. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Traei, and I'm the founder of Her Stories Untold, a global initiative um, dedicated to sharing empowering and inspiring stories of women from all walks of life around the globe. Now, Her Stories Untold is proudly in association with Her Journey Empowerment Society, a registered nonprofit organization dedicated to uplifting and celebrating the diverse journeys and stories of individuals around the globe. This initiative began as a way to bring visibility to the incredible journeys that women and other groups have taken to become whom they are today. So many of these stories go untold, not because they aren't significant, but because the women themselves, the individual themselves, don't realize the power and importance of their experiences. Our mission is to uplift, empower, and inspire women globally. If you feel that you have a story to share, I invite you to visit www.herstoriesuntold.com. Before we begin our talk today, I like to do a land acknowledgement. And before we dive into today's conversation, I want to acknowledge that the land on which I live and work is the traditional and unceded territory of the Kwikwetlem Nation and lies within the shared territories of Tsleil-Waututh, Katsim, Musqueam, Squamish, and Kikeh First Nations. And I want to make a really quick announcement about BC Minorities for Film and TV Society. As you are aware, this talk is being presented by Her Stories Untold as well as BC Minorities for Film and TV Society. Now, we've just launched our first ever Untagged Film Festival as of September 8th last week. So, I'm very thrilled to announce this. And basically, this isn't just another film festival, it's actually a statement at Untagged, your film comes first. We don't judge by bios or backgrounds or identity labels. We watch your work, untagged, unfiltered, and unbiased. So we're accepting about 30 unforgettable films from creators around the world, any background, any genre, as long as your story is bold and true. So this is the first ever edition and it's virtual and it's global and we're awarding up to $4,000 Canadian in cash prizes across 13 inclusive categories. So submissions are now open. If you have a story that deserves to be seen without a label, we want to see it. Okay, so you can apply now at Film Freeway and search for Untagged Film Festival. Remember, no labels, no filters, just film first. And very importantly, to 7 beats per minute, I'm welcoming everybody here. And I want to note that, we gather not just to talk about a film, but really to explore the raw, untold truths that live beneath the surface of silence, identity, and survival. 7 beats per minute is not your typical sports documentary, okay? It's the deeply intimate story of Jessie Liu, a world record free diver who can hold her breath for over 8 minutes and dive over 90 meters, which is basically the height of a skyscraper or 30 floors, okay, into the ocean on a single breath. Yes, on a single breath. But more than that, it's about what she's been holding in all her life. So the title 7 beats per minute refers to what happens to Jessie's heart rate at the deepest point of her dive. It slows down to just 7 beats per minute. Now imagine that, your heart nearly stopping so your body can survive in total stillness. That physical stillness becomes a haunting parallel to the emotional stillness many women, especially in Asian cultures, are taught to maintain, holding back fear, anger, and pain, and breathing only when it feels safe. The film's title comes from Jessie's actual heart rate while diving, a stunning metaphor for what many women also endure emotionally, holding their breath through courage, endurance, trauma, pressure, and cultural silence. So directed by Yuqi Kang Yuqi. This film's not just a portrait, it's a surrender, a dive into truth, trauma, and the beauty of finding breath again. So 欢迎大家 welcome.
Thank you for coming on the live streamings.
No, thank you very much for joining us here. And, just to share a little bit, Kang Yuqi, she is a critically acclaimed Mongolian Chinese Canadian filmmaker whose work spans Asia, North America, and Europe, capturing deeply personal stories with global resonance. Um, and Basically raised in China and now based between Canada and the US, she brings a globally informed lens to intimate, character-driven stories that often blur the line between observer and participant. Her debut feature, A Little Wisdom, from 2017, won the Best Canadian Feature Documentary at Hot Docs and the Grand Jury Prize at Doc NYC, and was later acquired by Amazon Prime Video. Her second feature, 7 Beats Per Minute, 2024, was co-produced with the National Film Board of Canada, premiered at SXSW, and screened at Hot Docs, Warsaw, and Hainan before receiving a Canadian theatrical release in 2025. Her upcoming third feature, which we'll chat about at the end of our talk today, Fruit is Ripe 2025, was commissioned by TELUS Originals and is set to premiere at the Calgary International Film Festival. She is alumna of Bernoulli Talents, TIFF Talent Lab, and the Canadian Film Center's Directors Lab. And we will be sharing the links to her work later at the end of this talk. And and we have welcoming here Jessea Liu. She's a distinguished world record freediver, boasts an impressive breath-holding capacity of over 8 minutes and can dive beyond 90 meters or 300 feet on a single breath, earning her 15 gold medals in international competition. That's freaking amazing. So, born in China, she was nurtured in an education-focused family, obtaining her undergraduate degree from Peking University in Beijing. Jessea pursued higher education in the United States, securing a PhD in clinical pharmacology and pharmacogenetics. Combining her extensive scientific knowledge with the mental training expertise honed through freediving, Jessea channels her passion into exploring the vast possibilities of self-healing. She's dedicated to empowering others to harness the transformative potential of the mind and unlocking their innate capacity for resilience and well-being. And we will be sharing her link too as well at the end of the talk. So welcome here. Did you
Thank you
want to start by telling
for
us about the film?
thank you
Yeah.
for having me here, and it's really great to meet your audience as well. Thanks for the very nice introduction. It's just freediving has been my passion, and I really enjoyed sharing a little bit of that with your audience.
Yeah, I'm very excited. The audience is very excited. Some of the audiences that maybe haven't seen the documentary yet, maybe we can get Yuqi to share a little bit about this documentary to start. Yeah.
Yeah, so 7 piece per minute for me, I started the film without the idea of making a film about freediving. But upon learning freediving myself and meeting many divers, I really want to deep dive with the quest of what takes somebody to do this really extreme dives. That's when I met Jesse, and our journey began in 2019.
Wow. Okay. So, and then how long did it take for you to, from beginning to the end, finish this documentary?
I think even now we're still at the parts of the journey of the film at the afterlife. But from 2019, when I met Jesse for that initial meeting, probably in July, we wrapped the filming maybe in 2023, and then the film came out at a festival circuit last year, and we've been traveling with the film on and off until now. I think we're still have like a showings in Asia. There's a like I think showing of the film in Asia has just began, so we're excited to see where it's gonna lead. So I don't think we're at the end of this film journey yet.
Yeah, that's quite amazing. I was able to watch your documentary in person. I think was it last year? No, earlier this year. Yeah. It was quite amazing experience. And then I was like, oh, I gotta talk to them, And yeah, I mean, I don't dive, okay? Not a confident swimmer whatsoever. So I've just seen this whole experience and then navigating through both your emotions, as a director, and then, backing up Jessie on her diving, and it's a new experience for you. It was pretty incredible. So thank you for making this documentary. Whereabouts in Asia can you watch this right now?
Yes, so the film currently is toured with Banff, China, and also being screened by independent screening partners. I think the next screening will be in Shanghai with Banff, China, and in September 26th, it will be showed in Taipei as well by the organization Cinex, the biggest Asian documentary platforms, champions all the Asian documentary stories. And there are more dates I will come up on my website and on my Instagram, so I will definitely be sharing that. I think the nearest screening is the one in New York that happens next week
Okay.
in SBA Theater as well. And I will be there in person to present the Q&A afterwards.
That's amazing. So if anyone wants to meet them in person, go to New York next week. We'll be sharing more of that details information of in how and where after we finish our talk today. So that leads me to the first question today. So now, Yuqi, as a filmmaker of Mongolian Chinese descent, who has lived across China, Canada, and the US, and, how has your cultural identity shaped your approach to storytelling? 你作为一位具有蒙古与华人的背景，旅居中加美三地的导演，你的文化身份如何影响你说故事的方式与视角？
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I was born in ethnically Mongolian families, and my both my grandparents they use Mongolian names, and their first language is Mongolian. And my parents they grew up in a kind of a half Mandarin environment and half Mongolian language environment. I am the first generation was given to a Han Chinese name instead of Mongolian name, but on my identification card, it's always labeled the ethnically Mongolian in China because China is a very big country, has many different ethnic groups, and we are the Mongolian people in China. It's interesting, even growing up in China, I look like most people. However, I've always been identified as a Mongolian person. When people see that in my identification card, they will be like, "Oh yes, you don't look like us. You're Mongolian," and those preconceived, I would say, like cultural labels has always set me feeling a little different from other people, even just upon initial introduction. I think that experience is almost similar when I first came to Canada. I was in a very small town, no Chinese people, and the first thing people see me is oh, you're a girl from China, and that's always the first label that I've been recognized as the experience being introduced to Canada. I think part of me really enjoyed that I'm different, I'm unique because of who I am as a part of a label of my family heritage, but also like just carrying that as a lived experience has taught me really the human connections goes beyond and above what our labels are. Our values or heritage or family backgrounds don't stop where we are as human and then connect to one another. Um, I think that's also why my experience informed me to pursue a career in documentaries, because that's really when I can go deep and really explore human connections in storytellings, and in a way, like I can say, anywhere is my home, and anywhere is not my home, because just like this like a cultural background and the travelings and the different parts of experiences that where I have being identified.
Oh, thank you for sharing. That was beautiful. It kind of reminded me of when I first kind of came to Canada when I was little with my family. How was the like I had language barrier, like I didn't speak English. So, and then it was like very hard to try to fit in. And you're right about having this different perception and different angle of looking at things. And I'm kind of curious about what that meant for you. Like for me, I was always even now too, like globally we're traveling, but it's kind of interesting now, right? Because I can speak the language or try to fit in and stuff like that. You know, you're constantly kind of aware of who you are, what your differences are, what other people's differences are, and then how there's a commonality of balance between the two, or trying to build that, I guess, maybe in a sense, like an invisible bridge to bridge to yourself to the other person or groups kind of thing. So maybe if you have anything else to add, yeah, how what was
I
that language? Yeah.
definitely, I definitely relate to that. When I first came to Canada, like English used to be my worst subject in schools. So and what we taught is really not what is like the daily language in here. Um, but like I feel for me, it's maybe because of I always knew I was a little bit different in school because I'm the Mongolian girl, and I kind of celebrated I've been the unique one than everybody else, and the really exaggerated some like even like stereotypical like typings on what Mongolian people are. So and like those like things and when people recognize that oh you're Mongolian or you're Chinese, I just felt that was like a thing that I would just celebrate. So I don't really speak that well like English when I first came, but I feel like I never thought that was like a part that like made me smaller or made me try to fit in. I'm always just like a cut into it and really just like try to be myself in all the situations. But now like I feel to really re-examine my family history, it's a part of like a hidden and part of like a purposely like concealed in family histories is a lot of traumas. Same as like many like people, families in Asia dealing with trauma, they tend to hide it underneath or put it aside. When you don't look at them, they don't exist. Where I realize maybe part of my ignorance comes from how my family has been dealing with like intergenerational different things that I experience as a family together. Um, where now I'm re-educating what my identity meant and what those like past histories shaped my grandparents, shaped my parents, and therefore shaped who I am. So I think I kind of like grow up not feeling the effect, just being ignorant over those things, and now re-educating myself on what history does to us.
That sounds really powerful, and it's so very true. Kind of reawakening and then re-identifying and relearning about yourself, but never losing any parts of it. And which, you know, makes me want to ask you the next question that I have for you regarding your film was, what made you decide to include Jesse's childhood trauma in the film? Like, was that difficult emotionally or ethically? 你当初为何决定在片中就是呈现 Jessie 童年的时候的创伤经历，在这个情感上或论理上，是否会让你有点在类似挣扎？对。
Yeah, I think really the part of Jesse's past experience really was brought by Jesse first. Initially, when I met Jessie, she's so accomplished. She walks around like I just felt her energy is so uplifting. And we met, we talked for 5, 6 hours for the first meetings. And I was just really in awe of all her accomplishments. She graduated from the most prestigious Chinese university and has this PhD and also all this like world record champion dives. I'm just like feeling like as a a BIPOC creator, a Chinese woman myself, like I want to make her story, bring it out, and then really share with many other women how inspiring she is. But as we went a little deeper, Jessea started to unraveling her up when she encountered that accident and things that brought up from her past and how she like in that current moment in that 2019 the things that she's still trying to resolve is part of those initial early childhood experiences that has been very when she first shared it with me, that was really difficult because I relate to a lot of Jesse's childhood experience, but also like in a way we feel we grow up, we put those things aside, we never look at them again. They're just belong to the past, ignored, forgotten. And Jesse is the first one that among like anyone I know in my circles in this around the same generation who really rawly talk about those experiences and really opens the door in vivid details to talk about those things are still very much haunts her and she wants to really unpack what those things meant for her and emotionally how they affect her day to day even today. um, so it became something that Jesse was seeking for answers and really like I got introduced to that part and really like try to find like even like a foot stand, be comfortable to explore that with her. Ethically, I feel I know Jesse is ready to open this part of herself up to the story to the audience. Though I was always careful with things being shared momentarily, whether she's open to share or not. And Jessie has mentioned there are parts that she has shared, but realized that later maybe this is not a part that's belong to her. It's more of other people's journey. So we can take it out. I think I want to make sure whatever she shared, it's a whatever she's in the end comfortable to share with. So that's a kind of like always like a mutual exchange on what are the bases that are comfortable to share it. Also,
That
I
was,
think creatively,
yeah,
we didn't want to create creating something like a trauma story that really
yes.
grabs people. We want to celebrate what made who we are instead of only emphasize the traumas.
That is very true. And there was something that really pulled at me earlier when you were sharing about how, oftentimes, just through generations, we're told to, forget the past or, just let it go kind of thing. And that brought to mind of a recent encounter with my mother who has passed mid-stage Alzheimer. And I was really sad about her situation. And then she, in her state of mind, gave me a hug and she's, oh, let it all pass and forget it, leave it in the past. It's okay. So she could, even in that fragmented state, she was comforting me in such a way that exactly what you talked about, about our culture, just leaving things in the past and not really acknowledging that, right? Certainly, it's not to say that it is right or wrong, but it's a form of how we navigate through life, right? Not everybody, but certainly a big aspect of our past. So you mentioned just now about how not portraying the documentary as something, like trauma focused and whatnot kind of thing. So my next question is, what does it mean to portray an Asian woman in such an emotionally complex and physically powerful role? Because that's what it is. It is extremely complex, but it is also very powerful.
Yeah, that's an area that as a creator I feel deeply passionate over. I grew up inspired by cinema and I watch all kinds of cinema from all over the world. But like to think again, most of the story are made in my generation, the past generation, are by male directors first, and then like a lot of stories they're not characters that looks like me. And in China, those stories that really like the Asian women stories, like with like Asian characters, mostly the stories are portrayed by male directors too. That pretty much shaped a part of my worldview and my identity as well. Where now I'm older, I'm a parent myself. I learned, um, a lot of things that I have been trained through a male gaze as well, and I have to re-educate myself what the female experience that portrayed by female creators means, and there's still very much a lacking of very complex female characters on cinemas, and I've been seeking for those complex and inspiring female stories to be able to tell. So that's when I met Jessea. I'm just in awe with her whole life journeys, how she comes about, how she come from China, also immigrated to US. All these things really excites me. But also when she started revealing the things that made who she is, and maybe the things that she's still struggling with, are very much universal and resonated with generations of Asian women too. And I feel those are stories that are not tapped by many past generations of creators, and it's my goal to bring that up to larger audiences.
I think it's incredibly powerful that you did such a documentary and your angles and your pursuit of your focus in wanting to share this because I think I think because possibly because of our culture, sometimes we may feel shy to talk about things or express to the full extent of it kind of thing. But I feel like I wish to see these things, to understand the complexity and I emphasize that, what really spoke to me was that I hear repeatedly re-educating myself, relearning, right? That alone in itself is extremely powerful already. The fact that you're almost at a state of surrendering and opening yourself up and having that flexibility to absorb, what's new or even to rethink what you always have thought to be. And that leads me to the next question. I watched your documentary and it was quite incredible in my perspective because I saw the intensity of you being an observer and an insider. And then, so how do you navigate being both an observer and an insider when working with intimate emotional stories? Because I saw you guys look like sometimes you fought like a couple. And you made up and I laughed and it was very emotional, okay? 所以在拍摄这么私密又充满情感的故事时，你是怎么样在就是当一个旁观者或者是参与者之间取得平衡的？
I would say it's a very hard, slow journey for me to open up, to step in, really like then like it's also emotionally to step into the story and really recognize making Jesse's story really has an impact on myself, on my personal journeys, on my life, not just as a professional filmmaker, but really in my personal lives, to be able to see her dealing with like her trauma head on really was like also become this like emotional roller coaster for me as well. I think even like looking back, I enjoy being a documentary filmmaker because there's a safety behind my camera. I'm really like gazing at somebody's life, and I feel like a sense of like a protection because I'm only behind the camera witnessing somebody going through their raw life. And that gave me the invisible kind of armor that even though what's happening is deeply emotional, though I am having this invisible wall behind the camera, so I have like a little bit of protection is that with my emotions and my involvement. But as we're making 7 beats, it started in the intention that we'll film around 2 years and the film will down. And I'm just filming Jessea doing all these competitions and see where her life's gonna become. But then pandemic happened. We're not filming for several years, and pandemic put everybody in a deep self-reflective state.
Right.
Um, and then I was like seeing Jessea every year for a little bit to touch up and to just see where we're going with the film. And really that made us like grow together for several more years. And we dive together. We're not just only filming, we're also hanging out quite a lot. And when we're really starting to go back to the competitions, I really wasn't just a storyteller staying behind my camera anymore. I'm part of Jesse's life. I'm part of her friends. I'm part of her safety diver team. And I'm also the storyteller telling her story. So trying to refuse that role, say, I'm only the storyteller. Your emotion do not affect me. It's just impossible. And ultimately, I'm subjected myself into the story and recognizing part of Jesse's journey is also part of my journey. I'm really, really thankful to be able to make the story this way because I realized like it's a gift for me, and it's still like right now relearning and reopening things. I wouldn't think like without this part making the story with Jessea together, I will be able to do all these things and really dive deeper together in certain like emotional landscapes.
Wow, yeah, because it just I'm getting these flashbacks from watching the documentary, like how you navigated. It was definitely exactly how you put, and not an easy path to go back and forth. And I really like the way you shared about how you thought you had the safety of the lens at one layer of it, but then at the same time you became immersed in her life, right? And you were her safety diver, you said. I recall you didn't do such things before, right? So, but for this particular documentary, you had to learn all that. Maybe did you want to kind of touch into that a little bit? I know the audience may not everyone has seen the documentary, so which is why you still have to go see it. It's a little bit life-changing, I think, 7 beats per minute. So, yeah. What was that experience like for you, becoming her safety diver you mentioned?
Um, Yeah, um, I became a freediver when I started to make the film. So I feel capable in a way, like doing the safety divers range. But when we had the intention that I can also safety dive Jessea, I went to take the safety diver lessons from Jesse's mentor, who taught Jessea freediving at first. He's one of the most renowned freediving trainers for champion athletes, and that training itself is really rigorous. It's like a really like a multiple deep dive, like a safety dives throughout the training sessions, and really learn to recognize the signs for the divers because each divers reacts differently. It really is like this one-on-one experience under the water to be able to detect like unnoticed signs of a diver. It's the most important things for safety diver, and also that just even like capability wise, like go down to like 25 or 30 meter first and wait for the diver to come up and to swim up together and still have the ability in case something happened to be able to aid for the divers to come up. Physically, it was a big level up for me, but like it was also a great experience to learn. Freediving is not one person's sport, as Jessea first has told me, because I always felt freediving is a very lonely journey. You see that one figure goes down and one figure comes up. I felt it's like the ultimate lonely experience one can experience. But Jesse has always mentioned to me, freediving is not one person's sport. It's really the diver and the safety team. And when I learned safety diving, I really realized freediving is about connections. And it's really about the safety team and the trust with the diver and the diver to the safety teams.
Yeah, and exactly what you just said now, you captured that very well in your documentary. And that was why I wanted to ask you to touch on this a little bit because I felt that and I've never had that experience as a, free diver or being someone's safety diver. So that it was well depicted. So now, I wanted to ask you, as you document and and let these journeys unfold of other people's stories, have you yourself experienced bias or barriers as a BIPOC filmmaker, seeking recognition or funding? And how did you overcome that? 所以，作为一位有色人种的导演，你在争取资源或被看见的过程中，是否有遭遇过歧视或是阻碍？又有如何的突破呢？你们可不可以分享一下？
Um, yes, I think like a BIPOC experience pretty much shaped our lived experience, and it's a part that we can't not ignore.
Mm.
Um, but in my own like experience, I always set out. I like if something that I'm really interested, I want to tell the story. Then no matter what, I'm gonna make it. There are times I've been told, you should choose a different subject that's more commercially viable. This story, like I don't see it being interested to other audience, but I feel those are just prejudice because of this is not a story that's been shown because traditionally we like BIPOC characters or female driven characters are just not being produced, so when you don't know if there are audiences there, even audience hasn't been exposed or educated enough to see more diverse in the cinemas. This is why, like as a creator, I feel if I'm gonna make this story, I'm gonna make it no matter what. If I've been told no by certain, institutions or investors or at a certain platforms, then I'm going on to the next one and I'm going to the other ones, and eventually I meet people who want to support me, who believe in the story. For example, I've been trying to raise financing for the film in Asia, in North America, in Canada, in US, and there were many times it was a uphill battle, and it was hard. And finally I met Anita Lee, who used to be at NFB, and she as a BIPOC leader in NFB really believed in the story, and she took the story under her wing, and where we can really have a foot in with a structure to make this story. So I always believe if we really want to make this story, there's the uphill battle. But if you really believe it, you will find the right places to help you to make the story come to life.
That's super empowering, and thank you for sharing. And I also really believe that if you really want to make something happen, if you really believe in something in life, you gotta trust yourself and go for it. Of course, with consideration to a whole lot of other things. But I can say if I had listened to certain advice about certain things in my life, I would not be here speaking to you today. So, so, talking about uphill battles and overcoming that, I think you just gotta go for it. Because as you well said, how do you know that there is no audience, right? If
Yeah.
it's never been made? How do you know there's no one in the world that would use such a product or this service if it's never been done before, right? So you have to try. And sometimes you have to really trust yourself and gravitate towards that as opposed to gravitating towards what other people want. Because what they want may not be what you truly want, right? So now my next question to you is, what advice would you give to BIPOC filmmakers or creators that are afraid that their stories are too personal or not marketable enough? 你会给那些担心自己故事会太私人，或是有不够有 market value 的少数那些创作者的，你会给他们什么建议？
Mm-mm. I feel I think like a suggestion or maybe like a just like for my own personal journeys. I feel it's not even like oh I'm interested in make BIPOC stories or I'm interested in personal stories. I am first a storyteller. What I'm interested in is always a good story, but because informed by my lived experience there are stories that naturally I'm more driven to tell than the other stories maybe that I want to tell. So I always just followed my instinct. Whatever that I felt really passionate, I want to tell that. I don't want to like first. I think like it's not where I set up to think. Oh, I'm gonna choose Jessea because she's BIPOC or she's a female person. I'm always driven by that instinct, what I really relate deeply to, and what I feel confident as a storyteller can tell the best. I think that will be like kind of like what I can share with other fellow filmmakers. It's really don't think over the rules, don't limit yourself to labels. Just follow your heart, follow your instincts as a pure creator. What really speaks to you as your creative soul will be something really brings the best results.
That's so very true. Something that speaks to your soul, right? Because that will be the fuel that will drive you to continue to have that passion to like follow through to the end and then explore intensely and deeply. Now, I have a question. If you could redesign the documentary funding ecosystem to prioritize inclusion and equity, what would it look like? 如果我让你重新设计纪录片的产业的资金制度，让包容与公平成为那个 focus，它会是什么样？
I think it really comes to the what we say like the gatekeepers. I think right now there's the intentions of for the funding system to bring on um, the diverse approach and include like have like those diverse inclusions initiatives. However, I think really those uh those models are really built from bottom up. It's not like a from the top down. And
Mhm.
what I really think what needs to change or slowly to change is really from the top layers that people shares the mutual understanding what diversity inclusion means. It's not an effort in the grassroots. There's a couple small fundings, and each year we include a certain numbers of people. So on paper there's a ratio that looks balanced. I think this concept and this diversity inclusion needs to come from the very top, even like with leaderships that reflects that inclusion, with leaderships that really understands the diverse experiences are meant. I think that will be what ultimately takes the change in our current ecosystems.
Yeah, and I think that, fundamentally that is very true because as a foundation, it's not only important to just have, space and opportunities for certain groups, I think, but to fully really understand and take the heart to know what it is about, as opposed to, oh, we need to create something for this particular group. And then that's been checked off. And it goes back to, repeatedly, not just here, but I also hear other places like yeah, should you have been focused as your top priority? Oh, this has to be a BIPOC documentary. I need to look for somebody that looks like Jesse to be the main character of my documentary. Then maybe your drive and your path of how your documentary unfolds will be completely different because maybe it takes you away from all those things that you were able to feel and navigate and, you know, that type of thing, right? So, I think it's just going back to being authentic to what you want to make. Yeah, and really
Yeah,
prioritize that. And as a
yeah. There
so
is like a sometimes frustrating to hear like, oh, we already have like a female Chinese a Chinese female story, so that we cannot have another one. Those things do happen, and it happens to many other people. Oh, we already have like a film in this subject matter, so we cannot take the second one. Those are not inclusions. They're
yeah,
exclusions because there's only one spot for all these other creators who are making this story. I think that if we can prioritize what story is for what stories are, it's also important. But I also understand right now we're very at a very early on stage, so there's like a one for each categories, but that's also not how it's long sustaining for the entire population.
it's so very true. And at the end of the day, I think what it comes down to, no matter where you are, what you are, and what you look like, and whichever group you belong to, a good story is a good story. Yeah.
Yeah,
A good story, an important story that needs to be told needs to be told, no matter what it is. So that's that's how I feel about it. Yeah. So thank you so much, Yuqi. And now we're gonna turn a bit of the attention to Jesse here. So thank you for your patience. Yeah, it was beautiful to learn a bit about the film, the documentary, behind the camera and going to in front of the camera and deep inside. So um, now we saw Jesse's reflection, your reflection on your upbringing. Um, when I was watching it, I felt they were deeply emotional and very honest, and I felt like I could identify, you know, different layers of it. I saw myself, I saw, other girls. So I want to ask you, what gave you the courage to share those moments about your mother and childhood? 所以你谈到你童年与母亲的经历时，非常的诚恳又非常的动人。我想要了解是什么让你有勇气公开，即使是你有脆弱的记忆。
Trey, thank you very much for watching the film, first of all. And Yuki also has played a major role in how the film story eventually played out. And I remember the first conversation Yuki and I had, why are we making this film, right? It wasn't about a sport, heroic story. It wasn't about any kind of like um, pumping up like these kind of victory story. It wasn't even so much about like a success story for a female person who moves to another country. I really wanted it to be an emotional story, and Yuki was fully on board with it. And I think that's where we connected from our first meeting. Um, so in the film, there was a question Yuki kept asking, right? Why do you free dive? What's there in the deep ocean where there's nobody, no oxygen, so dark? What are you going there for? Without sort of like exploiting what's in the film, for those of you who haven't seen it. For me, freediving is really a journey to discover myself, and that's what kept me in the sport from the very beginning when I took my first class. I found something I didn't know about myself. And that intrigued me to continue to seek more understanding by observing my thoughts, listening to my emotions. And of course, on this journey, there will be some deep thoughts, deep emotions that's going to bubble up. And to not talk about my profound memories from childhood and those emotions that keep coming back, I think it just wouldn't be honest for the documentary, for the story. And I think what made it happen was really Yuki held a very, very safe space. She was very good listener, very good, conversation partner, and I almost felt like I was just sharing my personal story to a friend who has become a close friend over the years. It made it really natural. I also find that it seems to be something that Yuki wants to hear more, so that gives me a bit more confidence, right, in terms of what would happen to the audience when they hear about it, and perhaps there was something that some people may connect with, some people may want to hear about it. So rather than kind of keeping it away from the world. I did debate in my mind for sure about, should I give very sort of deep personal aspects of things, or could it be too heavy for some people or not? I did ask around for some of my friends as well. Eventually, I kind of also went with just going with my gut, and that's how it came out.
And I think right you did with that because going with your guts is the most authentic and genuine thing that a person can do. And to share this so powerfully vulnerable to at the same time, the really competing and doing the active role of being very courageous, being very emotional, being very honest, and then being very fragile all at once, right? So, and well, it was just it was pretty incredible, yeah. Because I felt emotional too. Like, yeah, I mean, we're all different people with different lived experiences and whatnot, kind of thing. So, but they resonate, I did want to, maybe we could talk a little bit, if you want to share about, how did you start free diving? And I know Yuchi earlier had mentioned about the uh, the accident kind of thing, which started this whole journey kind of thing, healing, transformative journey. I don't know if you want to share a little bit about all of that, yeah, in case they haven't, of course, the audience hasn't seen the documentary.
Yeah, sure. The reason I started freediving was just because I like seafood and I want to eat fish. Right. So I was living in Hawaii
Very
and I was
honest.
a scuba diver. So I was a scuba diver. I was bubble blower underwater and I saw freedivers, that's Hawaiian freedivers. It's their tradition for hunting and providing for the family to get food, put food on the table for dinner. They looked effortless underwater. They were so graceful and cruising the reef, stay very long time while I had this big tank on my back and I was not allowed to move up fast and I could only like move very slowly in any direction. I felt I was like a turtle and I'd like to become a free diver and just kind of, be cruising the reef like them. Then that's why I started freediving. People get into freediving for many, many reasons, right? It looks glamorous sometimes, or it seems another way of traveling or seeing the underwater world. Some people just want to see big animals, and you do get closer to large marine animals
Mm.
way easier when you free dive than scuba diving. You're not blowing bubbles, you're not making sounds, you're not scaring the animals away. And you're faster. So dolphins and whales, they're curious. Sometimes they come to say hi to free divers. Rarely do they do that with scuba divers, I think. Um, so there's a lot of fun parts of free diving. Of course, I enjoy. A lot of the reasons I travel around the world is to swim with animals in different, places, different kinds of animals. And what kept me in training in competitive free diving was, like I said earlier, about understanding myself, my potential, and eventually my limitations, which sort of was portrayed in one of the dives. I, tried to make a record attempt in the film and I wasn't successful and had to be rescued. And that incident actually happened before Yuki and I met in
Mm.
2018, and we only started filming in 2019. By that time, right, I was already kind of on the journey of, well, what did I learn from this incident?
Mm.
So the different stages of freediving training for me taught me different lessons. Right? In the beginning, it's more so, where else do I have potential that I don't know about? I wanted to explore, and then there are a part where it was a very human emotion connection with safety divers, something I never experienced in my life. This is such a unique emotional experience for me. And then there's other parts where like, okay, I think I found my limit, right? And what did I learn from that? What are the signs and symptoms prior to hitting that limit that I should learn from, and therefore not to do that again? I think it's not possible to be a competitive freediver without going over the limit at least just once, because the spirit of competitive freediving is to hold your breath as long as you possibly can, right? And if you end a dive and feeling, oh, that was great, I felt great, and then you haven't tried hard enough, you haven't got closer to that limit, right? But also once you've learned from being close to the limit, I also think that it's not probably a good practice to keep hitting and going over that limit, because then you haven't actually learned much from it, right? So it's about letting yourself get to your peak performance but not overshooting it. So there's a lot of sort of philosophical aspects of it. There's the understanding of your body's physical condition, managing your health, your rest, but also understanding your psychological state, managing your thoughts and emotions, expectations. Um, and I believe the mental aspect of it is the majority in the sport of freediving, more so carries more weight than the physical aspect of it.
Wow, that was yeah, that's so very true. I mean, like things are always easy and good to watch just on screen, and this whole experience. And what really stood out to my mind right now is just like both of you. Like it was very inspiring and empowering because I consistently hear both of you say about, oh, I reflect, I think about these things, and then I evolve, I improve, I work on these things, I kind of thing. So it's like an ongoing, non-stop cycle that you continue to work on this, your own internal struggles, right? As you navigate and deal with physical or emotional challenges internally, externally, kind of thing. So those are kind of out of the control. Now, to kind of talk about why the 7 beats per minute is like really incredible, because I think it ties in with what you just shared. Like it's extreme slowing of the heart rate, just to give actually, sorry, it's a severe slowing of the heart rate, just to give an audience a concept of an idea. Your normal resting heart rate is 60 to 100 beats per minute, okay? So to get this severe slowing of the heart rate, you're talking about less than 60 beats per minute. So a clinical emergency with credible sources that I looked up, okay, is under 30 beats per minute, which can be life-threatening in most contexts. So 7 beats per minute is like it's crazy rare. It's unheard of, right? Except in elite freediving, such as the thing that you do. And I love how you both say, "Oh yeah, we tried it out. We took lessons." I'm like, I don't think I can ever do such a thing, but maybe one day. But it's just such a state that where you're extreme in a state of extreme oxygen conserving states, and that free diving, you're in a survival mechanism, right? So that you get to see that's often observed in whales, seals, and also humans, right? So slowing your heart rate dramatically and then constricting peripheral blood vessels and then prioritizing blood flow to the brain and heart, right? And yeah, so I just think it's beyond crazy. And I think what you mentioned earlier too is so true. It is very much symbolic, a psychological significance, right? Your body's kind of barely alive, but entirely focused on survival and surrendering to that state of complete surrender and control at once. So it's a paradox of vulnerability and power. So I just kind of want to talk about that. Yeah, how incredible. It's just not just 7 beats per minute. Um,
Well, to clarify, my heart rate was never measured. right? So it's not that actually measured, documented at this day, particular time, that was my heart rate. And
Yeah.
uh, how long do you think a person can survive being submerged underwater and come out neurologically completely normal? Any guess?
This was not planned. This is a long time. Okay, I have no clue. That's the question that kind of came to mind. Like, yeah,
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 I think that it might be even lower than 7 beats per minute, which 7 is documented. Yuki did a research about it, right? So there's documented human heart rate being that low. From literature, the longest survival story of a human submerged in ice cold lake
yeah.
was about 1 hour, 1 hour not breathing. And it was a
Wow.
very, very young girl, a child
Yeah,
with parents when the car slipped in the winter and went into a frozen lake.
yeah.
The adults, they all drowned, but the child had no fear, I would think, at the time. So therefore, there was no fighting. And the child was probably just letting the body took over and went into this conservation mode. And her core body temperature dropped to very, very low. I believe it was around 19 Celsius when she was rescued. And being underwater and not breathing for an hour, I couldn't imagine how low her heart rate must be to be in that state. And then when she woke up over 2 hours in the hospital of kind of rescue, that her neurological function results came back all normal. And this is documented in a scientific journal, a case study from
Wow.
the 1980s. Yeah, and there are multiple case studies like this. Not just one girl. I have seen at least a few of younger children with this type of similar extended breath hold time underwater and survived. And I think compared to that, all of the freediving competitions and world records are just, you know, jokes, right? Because where are we? Adults, we compete, kind of work our, you know, body so hard and mind so hard, and we could only get to like for women, it's like 9 minutes, a little bit over 9 minutes is world record. For men, it's like debatable between like 11, 12 minutes, I think. But kids, kids can do like an hour. So like adults, we are really bad at this compared to kids.
This is a very interesting conversation now because I think as adults we think too much because we learn
Exactly.
things and then we cannot untrain or unlearn. So this whole concept of trying to change things, trying to improve or trying to perfect things, it's like all in our head. And sometimes that gets in the way of just being and surrendering, right? So, and what you just talked about right now also emphasized that the human body is nothing short of miraculous, like especially when you consider what it can adapt to, endure, and perform under extreme conditions. Exactly, with your free diving and as well as that little girl, surviving for an hour, in those conditions and whatnot, kind of thing. So, and I think, yeah, I think we underestimate how our entire body, our lungs, our heart rate, our neuroplasticity, in being calm under stress, and all those things in combination, our cellular adaptation, our bloodship phenomenon, emotional and spiritual capacity, everything. Like it's just such incredible powerhouse. Yeah, we forget that sitting here talking and breathing and doing all the things that we love, all the feelings and emotions, that we get to encounter, right? So, wow.
Right, you hit
Now,
the key word. You said surrender, and that is one of the key skills in freediving. Stay relaxed and surrender, then you become a really good breath holding athlete.
yeah. Yeah, that's so very true. Like I mean, just some weeks ago, like I was swimming in the ocean and I'm not a confident swimmer whatsoever. And I know that there were moments where I felt panic because it's that sense of loss of control because I'm not sure I'm doing well or, where am I going or the conditions of the water that I was in kind of thing or the situation. Um, but it's usually in those moments, it's not very often, but I force myself to really calm down and just like surrender. Then I don't switch into panic mode. Because if I start switching it, it's like you're like flailing around and you're really scared. Yeah, so totally about the surrender. Um, I wanted to talk about this important layer of I guess we were talking about mother and childhood and our past and kind of thing and emotions brought on to this whole journey. I wanted to ask you how do you think traditional Asian parenting has shaped how we approach mental health? Everything that we talked about, our vulnerability and ambition today, especially for women. 你怎么看传统亚洲式的教养方式？它如何影响我们今天对心理的健康、脆弱表达和野心的态度？尤其是对我们女性而言。
That's a really good question, and it's also a very complicated question. It You said Asian parenting, right? So I think we must acknowledge that there's different regions and different diversities across this whole entire continent. And not to just overgeneralizing it, I would probably speak from my own experience being a Chinese kid during a period of time when we had a single child policy.
Hmm.
That's also kind of a unique situation worldwide. That period has ended now, in case somebody is curious. Now the government actually encourages families to have two, three, or even more kids. So it was unprecedented in Chinese culture to have this limit on how many kids you could have. So therefore, which means our parents had no precedent to follow. Like there was no like official kind of preparation or training for them to understand what's about to happen, to their family dynamic and uh, how their relationship with the kid would be. But it also happened at a time when the economic growth in China was
Hmm.
unprecedented fast, right? So it it almost felt like from more developed Western countries took them hundreds of years to go through. China did it in probably a few decades. Then therefore the stressors of day-to-day life became very different from generation to generation. So perhaps at my grandparents or parents' generation, mental health was not as important compared to other stressors that are more imminent and life-threatening, right? So they went through war, they went through famine, they had to like figure out which tree bark can be eaten and which grass roots is nutritious and so on. So I think our parents may not understand or still don't know how to care for kids' mental health when we were kids. May not have sort of the experience of doing so or role models to follow, but at least I think they did their hard work, and parents raised kids and we were healthy and we survived. So they prepared us in a way where we can then pursue mental health and these kind of um, uh, education, understanding, and self-reflection for our generation. Hopefully, it goes, forward to the next generation. Um, on the ambition side, I think it's interesting being the single child. I I observe myself as well as a lot of my peers growing up, um, classmates or neighborhood kids. I did find that since we were the only hope in a family in terms of for the family, for the offspring, it kind of became a sort of double-edged sword, right? So first we got like all of the attention that we wanted, or didn't want, but at least it came. So we were in the center of attention for at least a period of time, and we got a lot of support from all of the, parents, relatives, and grandparents. That's very nice for sure. At the same time, it comes with a lot of expectation and pressure, right? So we almost had to be the like superman, superwoman to be able to sort of meet the expectations of the entire family and to fulfill the dreams that they didn't fulfill when they were younger. And we each family only had one kid, so whether you're a boy or a girl, you almost had to kind of be the weight bearer of everything, right? So for girls, especially for me, I was quite sensitive to this potential difference between son and daughter. Like parents' expectation for son and daughter could be different, or like this, even if not spoken, like this subtle um, vibe, or throughout conversations, or throughout these kind of uh, propagandas that we hear through media channels. Um, that me being a child, being a girl, I never was willing to say that or think that I'm any less than a boy. It's almost like I want to compete with a boy on the same level. I want to be as good as they are and do the things that everything that the boy get to do and can do, and do it as good as they are or even better. Um, but if I imagine if I had a brother in my family, and then the parents would be telling each of us different things and setting different kind of expectations for us, I wouldn't be surprised if my personality came out completely different. So there's that, being a single child. And therefore, I almost think that the part of the ambition is just kind of the result of that period, that's very specific period of time, and how the society was structured, how family were kind of structured. And also interestingly, when I was a kid, we didn't have internet, right?
Hmm.
So it was pre-internet. So it wasn't like we could go online and search like, oh, what do other families talk about? What do other people in other countries think about? We had no alternative reference point. So it's like you are completely immersed in your family culture and in your neighborhood's culture, and you're kind of just, having to accept what is normal. Um, and of course, by teenager years, we had this luxury of getting access to alternative universes and realities, and perhaps there's some intensification of the rebellions and generational gap as well.
Yeah, no, those are very, very unique shares, and thank you for pointing out. You're absolutely right. Being an Asian woman growing up, depending on which geographic location you are based in, yeah, you would have a totally different experience, or with similar traces and whatnot. Like, I think for I mean, like I grew up pretty much in Canada because I went there. Our family immigrated there when I was quite young. But I also observed that there are definitely similar traces, being a girl in the family. And I have to agree that maybe not every single Asian family for sure, but the approach to mental health is not something like fully readily talked about or welcomed upon, or fully expressed like, oh, don't worry, go look for this and that, we'll help you. It's kind of like I would almost say they avoid it, like it doesn't exist, so to speak. It's kind of like I don't know, maybe not exactly the same, and no disrespect in any way, but my grandma would like if you said you were allergic to nuts, they would like, oh no, you're just a picky eater, right? Kind of thing. It would be kind of brushed off in that sense, right? And it's not to fault them, but it's just a different way of approach of dealing. Certainly, I think there was. a lot of vulnerability internally, but then that gets kind of possibly blocked, right? Because of I felt like I also felt like I had to be, different levels. It was like I was a surrogate husband, a son, brother, like every single different role to my mother as in an Asian culture, like kind of thing. Like, yeah, there wasn't, I mean, it was always kind of blurred, you know? And in terms of ambition, like for myself in my family, I think, yeah, we didn't really have. I mean, I have a brother and sister, but we didn't have like, oh, only the guys could do this or the girls could do this, or because you're a girl, you should just go marry some guy. In fact, my mom always said the opposite. It was always like, not yeah, you shouldn't do anything less. You should try this and that. So I think, yeah, there were some parts that I felt like I could identify and relate to, but certainly, of course, I also a different time period. Like right now, we have this ease of accessibility to information to understand other people, but back then, it's really either internalized, never really fully expressed, or never fully really understood. So I think yeah, it's definitely a different time. Um, I wanted to ask you, many Asian women are taught to be high achieving but emotionally silent. Okay? High achieving but emotionally silent. What message would you give to your younger self or to, girls today, women today? 有很多亚洲女性从小就是被教导要努力成功，但却压抑着情绪。那你会对你年轻时的自己，或对现在的其他女士们说些什么呢？
Yeah. So for the younger children or myself, if I could time travel, right, I would probably tell her to be more extroverted and make friends, not just with um, kids of the same age, or perhaps talk to more neighbors, talk to more people that maybe, some ways are considered unsafe, but at least, if you go to like a public swimming pool, you go to ice skating ring and maybe just ask more questions, talk to other people, adults, and even though if you hear 9 out of 10 people tell you the exact same answer, but perhaps there will be one person who shares more similar view with you or could, be your emotional support in that way, or be more willing to listen to your emotional stories, right? So have some kind of cross age gap friends could be really really good. And there are definitely people like that out there. Just I think when I was young, I was uh, kind of not encouraged to speak out. Um, but at the same time, I didn't think that I was trying hard enough to be outspoken with uh, different situations with more people, right? So maybe I was easily taken back when I hear no like two times or three times. Um, and I think um, in terms of being silent, it has it has the good side of it as well. It's good and bad because it's like the Asian culture is it's not just for women. I think it's for both men, women, or like younger boys and girls. Uh, we are we're often taught to spend more time listening, observing, and learning rather than raising questions and be outspoken, which could be viewed as disruptive, right? So not respecting the elders or seniors. I think this way of being has its own virtue, um, right? Especially when you're with like a large group or like a lot of people. So time is limited. But at the same time, I believe with any kind of intimate relationship, any kind of intimate connection, being encouraged to talk about your thoughts, talk about your opinion, talk about your feelings, and having those expressions being seriously considered and having discussions about around it is really really important for self understanding, for self worth, and for sort of self development. Yeah.
Those are very strong points, and it's important because what I'm hearing as you just shared is like coming out of your own community, right? Sometimes that connection with other groups is very important, and then just really honing in to build up those values as you evolve in different paths and different journeys. And you're right, this isn't just for young girls. I think it's also for the men. Where I know in our culture, like oftentimes we're yeah, you're exactly right. We're told not to express too openly. Like when I first went to when family first immigrated to Canada, I was kind of shy in class. It's hard to believe because I talk a lot as people that know me. But yeah, like I didn't know that you could say something you didn't share. And then you avoid from talking back, or the teacher says something you don't really express, even though you think other things. But then as I grew up, got more intertwined with the Western society of North America, I was like, oh no, you need to raise your hand. You need to say you don't like this, right? Because otherwise people think you like it or you have no opinion, right? So, and then in I know like Asia, if you go to a party, you're the one like saying something's going on, this and that, and you express your opinions. You're right. There could be certain angles where you can be perceived that you're opinionated, you're problematic, you're trying to be disruptive, right? Kind of thing. But at the same time, I totally agree with you. Like it's also it's an important virtue to kind of stay quiet because sometimes from that stillness, which is exactly, kind of related to this surrendering of the situation of the body and the mind, right? You get to receive and observe and take in a lot, which is kind of like when Yuqi was sharing with her directing, right? When you navigate between the observer, right, and being immersed in it. Yeah, so that's how I see these 2 points. Um, Now, I wanted to ask you, do you see free diving as a metaphor for survival and self-rebirth for women struggling with cultural expectations and silence? 你认为自由潜水可以象征女性在文化上的压力与沉默中，求生与重生的历程吗？
I think freediving is a tool or a school where we can go to learn certain skills. To be good at holding your breath, you need to learn how to be with yourself and be mindful of the thoughts and understanding how thoughts and emotions work together, how one may influence another. And each breath hold is not long, it's just a few minutes, right? But it's a sort of a meditation. And some people believe it's a shortcut to the deeper version of meditation. And it really depends on the person, how they wanted to pose the question. Right? When they do free diving, they could go into the breath hold with a question. They could be curious, and then they could find their own answers. Um, it's not a practice where you could have a manual for it. There are certain technical aspects of freediving we could teach, and everybody could learn. Everybody who is in general health state could learn to hold their breath for 3 minutes or longer, right? But not everybody can do 5 minutes or 6 minutes or longer. Um, those technical aspects include how do you use your chest muscles? At what rate do you inhale and exhale? And how much do you inhale? How much do you exhale? Everything with very specific timings and movements. And where do you start holding your breath? And how do you relax your body and do your body scan? All of that it is standardized and we could teach, everybody could learn. But there's no manual we can come up with for the voices in your head, the mental conversations you are having with yourself, right? And how do you observe it? How do you understand what you heard and what do you do with each thought? And that is a wild play field. It's very, very wild, endless inner world for a person to go and explore. So in that world, I think you can get whatever you are questioning. for about yourself, and you can find the answer from that world if you just give it time and give it practice. So that's the fascination that I have with freediving and breath holding practice. And if your intention is that you wanted to um, just be better at relaxing yourself, it's not necessarily saying rebirth or like a completely transformation, but it's a small change that can improve your day-to-day life experience. You can probably find the answer and know how to do it. But if you really want to reinvent yourself, you just go, I'm tired of how I do things. I really want like this um, inside out recreation. I need to break myself down in certain aspect of my life and rebuild myself. And you go and do your meditation kind of like practice, you could still find it. And freediving is not the only way to do that. I think any kind of meditation where you can truly connect with your inner thought and emotion offers that opportunity. Freediving is one of the ways that I personally find it's very, very practical because you can repeat a breath hold many times, but you get very different results. And you
Mm.
could, you know, in each breath hold doesn't take long, just a few minutes, right? And you can have the exact same preparation, and you will notice just having very slightly different thoughts, you have very different breath hold results and outcome and your experience going through those few minutes. And then it's not that hard to then do your comparisons and understand like, okay, if I think this way, my experience is like this. If I think differently, my experience is better or worse. So um, it does put your body in a place where you are in a much quieter state. Because if you are doing the breath hold with safety in the water, you're not hearing the noise from above the water. So it's really, really quiet. And the vision is probably also quite, we say it's like not focused, deconcentrated. Sometimes we do breath hold without goggles. So you can't focus. Your eyes are just in the water, nothing's in focus, kind of having this diffused attention. And it
Mm.
helps also to go deeper inward. So there's like quite a few advantages when you do your meditation through a breath hold. You can't even notice your breathing, right? So the breathing itself sends a lot of sensations, which occupies a lot of your cognitive bandwidth. When you stop breathing, you're not feeling any internal sensations coming from your lungs, your breathing muscles. It just sets your red like it sets the stage for you for a deeper meditation. It kind of helps you go in that direction.
Wow, that was a very deep share because I meditate too and yeah, I'm very curious. What do you think about when you're freediving? Because your body is surrendered, right? You're calm, and then is your mind busy, or do you like choose one thing to focus on?
I have different types of thinking, of course. If I'm doing competition, I'm thinking more about what I'm doing, especially if I'm moving through the water, very moment to moment, kind of observing and also kind of like focus on the most hydrodynamic movements that I need to do and kind of doing my checks to know that I'm still safe and doing well. If I was just doing static breath hold, like when I first started and when I was practicing, I would first find something that I enjoy during the breath hold, like whether it being quiet or being the color of the water that I was seeing or feeling the sensation of the water touching my skin. It could be a
Mm.
very simple thought, a very, very simple singular thought. I would just keep my mind with it, stay with it because it brings me joy. And I was just
Mm.
having a good time. It helps me relax. And eventually, when you know how to relax, you know how to hold your breath longer.
Mm. I think I kind of know what you mean. Yeah. And yeah, that when you know how to relax, you're really calm, and then you can continue doing what you need to do. And your body is operating like a background computer. Yeah, it's just kind of flowing. So that's really interesting. So thank you for sharing that snippet. I wanted to ask you, do you ever feel caught between cultures, like between Chinese, but navigating this global space that expect different emotional languages? 你是否有曾经感受到文化之间的拉扯？就是一方面是我们中国的背景，然后一方面是身处期待不同情绪表达的国际环境，就对了。
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So when I first went back to China after living in the United States for a few years, um, it doesn't feel like I fit in anymore. Right? So
Mm.
people would remind me about certain small details. Um, but also, if I live in the United States, I think I am quite Americanized, but I can never feel truly belonging, right, in that community. There's definitely still gaps, but the good thing about it now is the globalization of culture, and then the movements, transportation becomes much easier across the globe, and there's a lot more mixing and exchanges that I am actually hopeful that this type of cultural clash is become less in the future. And I do travel with some American friends that are extremely well exposed to different cultures in the world. So like I went to Africa on the first trip with some American friends that they had been there before, and they were sharing with me about the unique cultural aspects of African people, and how we all should kind of like, while we were kind of outsiders visiting their homeland, their space, or kind of try to be the insider there with them and adopting and just uh, kind of act in the way that's expected in that culture. I think uh, when you travel a lot, you kind of get used to being more adaptive, and you no longer feel there is this emotional anchor or emotional stiffness that's attached with a particular culture. It kind of become more fluid, and you understand the value of other cultures, and you can also get used to adapting to it, and you become better at kind of just merging with different people. So I think travel is great for that.
Yeah, I have to agree. I love what you just shared. Like it's like you're almost like you can find a home everywhere you go, you know? And the fact that you don't have to anchor in any sort of way. And I think it's incredible. And what I really noticed is that you actually learn more from a foreigner that is in your home country, you know? Because their lived experience is authentic, it's raw kind of thing. I oftentimes I'm like, wow, I didn't know this about this place. And you know what, you're right, you know? I learned quite a bit from this other person that actually doesn't live there. So, the definition of what exactly is a home and what is that particular space in a culture, I think it really changed and wherever you go. So I think yeah, that approach that you just shared was really great. Now, navigating to that, I was thinking about this particular scene in the documentary where you intimately was sharing about the relationship with your mother. And, this is in relation to the previous questions about, Asian culture and being a woman, our vulnerabilities, building courage, going through different stages. So has your relationship with your mother evolved, or not since filming? 就是拍摄完之后，你跟你母亲的关系有改变吗？你是否在心里或与她之间找到了一些理解或和解？
And I would think that if you wanted to change a relationship with somebody, if that's the attention and you actually put time and effort to it, it will evolve. Um, so my mom lives in China in my hometown, and I live in the United States, and I travel quite a lot these days, right? So we don't really get to spend a lot of time together. We don't get to see each other often. I did see her, briefly last year, and we did make phone calls from time to time. But I spent a lot of time thinking about her. I spent a lot of time uh, sort of connecting dots. Sometimes I get a perspective which I never thought about before. I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that helps me understanding our relationship and what happened between us." So, I do believe that my relationship with my mom has been evolving since the start of the film. When Yuki and I started filming to the end of the film, there was several versions of that. And then afterwards, similarly, it has been evolving over the time. And I'm also grateful to meet sometimes friends who remind me to, keep this like a active subject in the mind and don't just brush it under the carpet and think like, okay, like I'm past that. Because I do believe your relationship, any person's relationship with parents is one of the fundamental and important part of the life journey. So uh, yeah, I think like my mom had, you know, before she had like been angry with me quite a lot. At the same time that I'm understanding that usually fear is kind of the underneath layer of emotion behind anger. So anger is like the armor of the anger that she was projecting. But at the same time, I was like, if I was able, when I was younger, if I was able to see through that armor, if I was able to better understand her fear and what made her so angry, that I think if I had that ability as a kid, I would have been much better placed with her in the past. Right. And this is something that um, I think that I could, be aware of with having interaction with my mother. And my mother, she's also evolving her own emotional journey over time as well. So I think, um, gradually we'll build much healthier versions of interactions.
That's very powerful. And I think, and just to give the audience a little bit of context, I think for anybody, like the relationship with the mother can always be complex, you know? And I think with, like for myself being Asian, I think there's an extra added layer kind of thing, right? Now, going back to earlier questions, at the beginning of the talk, we had talked about women and Asian cultures and what it's like to be a woman. And I think they carry that, even more intensely, like whether it's our mothers or our grandmas, right, kind of thing. Like there's generational of it carrying it through to our current phase of life, right? So, with that in mind, I think it's even harder and more complex for them to express like freely what it is. Especially earlier on, we talked about how there is no real support or expression of talk, acknowledgement about mental health, kind of thing, right? So. And it's so good that, to arrive at the stage where we can think about like, oh, maybe if we could do that in the past, it would have been improved, those relations kind of thing. But at the same time, we were children. So, and I think as an adult, this is where the busy mind comes in, right? Try to control everything. We think we can do better and improve, but wait, we also needed to remember that we need to live all these phases, all these years, right? To learn all these things and see this, to make that observation, to even take the space apart, then to come to that awareness. And even to come to that awareness, it's not like a full perfection in any sort of way. It's constantly evolving. So yeah. So thank you for sharing that intimate moment because I really liked it because it was very honest and it was very sincere. And it also made me reflect and think deeply about my relationships with my Asian family and how it was so different. I think growing up, I felt like I couldn't explain to them because I was kind of caught in between. I went to Canada at a very early age. I never really fit in, fully, completely. But then I also felt like I was an outsider at home at bits because I was a bit of this and that. Kind of maybe a little bit of what you were sharing about how you were in the States for a couple of years and then you went back to China, right? And then you had this challenge of fitting in because they would always see you kind of as an outsider, and you would feel that way a little bit. Yeah. So, but just be. That's all we can do. Now, I wanted to ask you, how can we, as women of diaspora or mixed cultural backgrounds, embrace both pride in our heritage and healing from its shadows? OK，身为有移民或混合文化背景的女性，我们应该如何同时拥抱文化的光芒，并从它带来的创伤走出来？
Yeah. Um, this is also a very, very complicated question. And I believe that it is it's almost feel like it's difficult to do both at the same time, right? So there will be always something that you identify with from your original culture that you deeply cherish, and then that could be anything, very personal choice that you wanted to preserve as you move forward. Um, but at the same time, I think it's okay to let go some of it and adopt the new way of doing things if you find that the different culture makes more sense for your current situation and your environment and being there and surviving in that new environment. I don't think there is a absolute answer to um, whether or not we need to hold on to what we think uh, was true to us before or how we were in the past. Um, we could, give us ourselves the permissions to be fluid if needed to be. And what you believe that you cherish, that is sort of something that is core to your own self identity that will always stay with you. And I think it's okay to evolve as well as situation change. Especially nowadays, the world just evolves so fast, and it's kind of hard to kind of just even keep up with. And the same thing with looking at ourselves in the past and looking at ourselves now. Um, it's important to give a little bit more um, credit to our previous versions, right? So sometimes I go on my cell phone and look at albums of me like 3 years ago, and I go like, what was I thinking back then? Like I didn't like myself that much, but I like that version of me so much better now. So probably I will have the same thought 3 years later, and then I will be critical about myself now, but 3 years later, the future me will be like, okay, you were doing pretty good back then. So I think it's okay to change and just kind of give ourselves a little bit more credit for the moment and embrace whatever is going to come in, whatever we're going to become in the future.
I love that. Yeah. Really just embrace yourself and embrace as things unfold and change. And I think that's so important. And I love how you pointed out, like, this improved version of yourself and remember to give credit because, like, how could you have an updated version of even a programming software for computers or, AI if you didn't have the version previous? So you need to credit yourself, to all the powerful versions before, whether they felt like a failure or not. They are the very foundation of who you have become today. So that alone itself is incredibly powerful. Um, we reached, I guess, the end of our talk. I had an incredible, incredible time and, conversation with both of you. So I'm very grateful for, both your truth, your artistry and bravery, and of course to all the audiences that are here. We witnessed something that was far beyond the film. I think we witnessed a human body in meditation, a descent into silence, a breath that was held for all of us and, really returning to the grace of that surrendering state. And I think in this documentary, what Jesse did was not just athletic, it was like almost ancestral in a sense, okay? That I find. And it was very poetic and delicate and while it was very physical. And it reminded us that the body, pushed to its limits doesn't just survive, it remembers, it adapts, and it transforms. So at 90 meters below the surface, where there's no light, no sound, and no margin for error, the human body becomes its most honest self. There is no mask, there is no noise, and just pulse and presence. And so I think what this deep stillness from 7 beats per minute dares, us to ask is, I think this is a question I'm going to throw back to the audience. What are we still holding our breath for? What depths do we avoid within ourselves? And I think as we rise from the experience, I invite you to carry this story with you, not as a tale of superhuman strength, but as a reminder the extraordinary is really always inside us. It lives in every breath, every heartbeat, and every choice to keep going. So thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Yuqi, and thank you, everybody, for breathing through this with us. Yeah,
Thank you, Traei.
thank
This is such a great pleasure speaking with you, and thank you everyone for listening.
Yeah, it was a great pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye for now. And I'll be sharing the links to all their works. So nothing's lost. Take care. Bye for now. Bye bye.